Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hi, Coach Bret. How are you?
I'm good, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. And it's going to be really interesting to hear a lot of your insights. Having had Coach Hartofilis on the show earlier in episode number 17, I'm so interested to see both what you learned during that time with him, as well as all the things you've done around that in terms of all the ways you've seen the game in different ways. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to be on. Hartofilis was a great coach and a great person, was an awesome person to work for, and now has been a great friend. So that's cool you had him on, and excited to follow up with that.
Awesome. So, just to get right into it, can you kind of tell our listeners a little bit about how you went from your collegiate career into deciding that you wanted to go into a lifetime of coaching?
Yeah, so raised in coaching. My dad was a college basketball coach for almost 40 years and was the head coach at a small school in mid-Missouri for 31 years, I guess it was. So I was born on the first day of basketball camp. My junior high was across the street from the college. So after school, I'd walk over across the street to the gym, set up my homework on the scores table, and watch him lead practice. You know, our lives revolved around it. I'd go on recruiting trips with him and road games and to the national tournament, and it was just a natural part of our lifestyle. So I was raised in it, and it was something I knew in my mind that I was probably going to be doing in some capacity, regardless. My mom tried to talk me out of it. The genes prevailed. So I played college basketball in Indiana. After that, I played for a Hall of Fame coach there, who's produced a lot of good coaches. And then it just kind of naturally segued into a coaching career of my own.
That's so awesome to think about. And then I'm really interested to hear about some of the stops you made at the beginning, especially with going out of the video room, because it's so interesting to hear about the main stories that everyone knows about are Eric Spoelstra and guys like that
Sure.
went from being in the video room 20 years ago to coaching the NBA finals. What was it like kind of for you in taking those lessons from the video room?
Yeah, the video room was a fantastic place to learn because you're watching a ton of basketball, just nonstop. You know, from around the league, you're watching your own stuff 2 or 3 times, and then you're doing opponent scouting. So every opponent you play, you're watching them 5 times. You just get such a good feel for different trends and different styles of play, different things other teams are doing, terminology, and you build your own little library as you're working through all that. I mean, I've never watched so much basketball film in my life. And so it's just such an intense experience, not only watching like high quality of video or high quantity of video about the number of stuff you watch, but the depth at which you're digging into all of it, that it forces you to dig into all of it. So it's a great spot to learn and develop your X's and O's and strategy and tactical skills.
That's really cool. And then thinking about how you were head of the video room in 2016 and then getting called up now to be the associate head coach of the G League team, that transition, and while you've been prepared to coach all your life, going from the video room to now the right at the front line of a really new G League team at that too. That was the first year. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, you know, it was a great transition. I think everyone in the video room is trying to get out of the video room and get onto the floor and do more hands-on coaching. The G League provided a perfect platform to do that. And when you're in the video room, you know, you're collecting all your ideas, right? You're putting together your portfolios and your binders and files of things that you'll do when you get your opportunity. And then the G League becomes a great training ground. It's an environment where you get to experiment and, you know, not necessarily the pressure on the outcomes as you see in the NBA or some other levels. And so you get to try a lot of things. And there's not a lot of voices there where an NBA staff might be 12 people on the coaching staff. In the G League, it's going to be 3 to 5. And so you get a lot of opportunity to hands-on experience, have a voice in meetings, and actually shape the direction of the program. And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity to put everything I learned into practice and see what worked and what didn't, in kind of a low risk environment.
It's super interesting, especially when you bring that up, because when people talk about the G League, I always hear about the differences compared to other leagues in terms of travel, the schedule, or two-way contracts. But that's the first time I've really heard someone talk about the size of the coaching staff, or in some cases where you're able to have that connection with players. That really is very different from almost any other coaching job.
Yeah, it makes it really unique. The NBA has a lot of perks and sexiness to it, but everyone thinks that you're in the NBA, and so you're going to get to coach LeBron James. But in reality, there's 10 people on staff and 15 players, and you might have one or two guys that you're really connected with and get to spend a lot of time with. When you get to the G League, that ratio turns to 4 or 5, and then because of smaller staff, you get to transcend just your small group of cohort and get to work with all the players and just impact on the team. There's 10 people can't have a voice in your strategy and your offensive playbook and all that kind of stuff. It's just too many voices. But when you're one of 3 or 4, then you can really move the needle. And so it's a great place to learn and try and experiment and put yourself out there.
When it comes to experimenting with newer fun things, when Coach Ty came on the show, he was talking about how he has some really funny little phrases. Now, I'm curious to see if he was using there with the one season you had with him, where it was a baby and church. Were those around back then, or did he develop those later on?
Yeah, we did do church as part of the program, so that was fun. He probably explained it, but it was just a way to kind of, when you go into church, they always have a segment of the program where everyone stops and greets each other and you say hi and shake each other's hands and stuff. So it was just a good way to either break some tension within the group or just a good way to start. Just go and high five and hug your brother and say hi and start with a smile. So yeah, that was a unique thing we had in our culture.
Of course, definitely a great way to release some tension, and I thought that was when he said that it was hilarious. So I mean, off that point, you've done so much work with the mental side of the game. How much do things like that, in terms of like that camaraderie with your players, positively impact performance on the court?
Yeah, for sure. The season is such a grind. The G League especially, because most guys in the G League, you're not there for the finances. You're making just enough money to survive the season. You're not there for the notoriety. There's not a lot of people are paying attention. Not a lot of people in the stands. You're there to get to the next level, to make a jump in your career. And it can feel like a sacrifice, like you're kind of going into the cave. And when I was head coach of the NAZ Suns, we used to talk about we're in Prescott Valley, up in the mountains in Arizona. And we talked about we're going from Bruce Wayne to Batman. The story in the Dark Knight trilogy where Bruce Wayne kind of goes off and into the caves and into the mountains and trains and gets really good. And he comes back to Gotham with all these skills to be Batman. And so that's what we were doing. But that grind is hard. It can be mentally taxing, emotionally taxing. There are days where it's hard to get up and do it again. It's easy to lose hope, especially when other people are getting called up or maybe you're not having the success you anticipated. And so anything like that, where you can kind of tap into a mindset of resiliency to keep going, to show up the next day, and a support group around you, that you're not in it by yourself. Those things are super valuable to helping players not only survive a G League season, but thrive in it and find the success they're looking for.
Of course, everything when it comes to mentality is so important, and I can't wait to really dive into that in a little bit, because you're so knowledgeable on that, and I would imagine it's helped you so much in your coaching. In 2018, when you made the jump to head coach of the Northern Arizona Suns, what was that jump like for you in terms of everything that's happened since then?
Kind of the next natural progression. The one thing working with Coach Ellis, he empowered the staff so much that it already felt like we had a big voice as if we were a head coach of a team. So that was a great preparation for taking over myself a couple of years later, and then again, you just, as you make those transitions and change roles, it reduces some barriers to trial and error and experimentation and figuring out what works and what doesn't. You start to sharpen your own voice and your own personality as a coach, and learn a lot about who you are. And it's really a learning experience you can't get any other way. I had reached a point in my career where I thought one of two things needed to happen. Either A, I needed an old wise man to come and tell me that what I believed wasn't going to work, or B, I needed to go do it and see and try and see what worked and what didn't, and learn from failures. The reality is A, wasn't going to happen. Like there wasn't one, way to do things, and there wasn't going to be an old wise sage to pick the stuff apart, because you don't know what's going to work, what's going to fit with your personality and with your character and your values, and then how's that going to match with the values of the organization, and then the personalities and the players you're coaching. It's an ever-changing equation. So being able to just jump into the fire 2 feet in, and the thing about being a head coach is like you can't take a day off. Like, and I don't mean that as you have to work 24/7. I mean every day you're the head coach, and so every day you have to show up with something, and to be put in a situation where you can't come in with no answers. You have to come up with something, and it really forces you to search and try and test your resiliency and toughness and your creativity. So it's just a invaluable learning experience.
It was interesting when you brought up being a head coach and how it's a daily thing. And it's funny how we keep on going back to Coach Ty, but all these lessons kind of tie in. How he had made such a big deal about being a head coach, not so much a head coach, but a head coach. And I thought that was, and for those that can't see, I'm pointing at my head. And when it said that, I'm like, wow, that's a different way of thinking. Because I think of myself, I'm an assistant coach at the high school level, and I'm not big on the X's and O's. I look at myself more as being someone that is closer in age to the players and can relate to them on that level.
Sure.
But in that sense, is it possible for an assistant coach to be a head coach in that sense, that they're talking to a player mentally from that side? What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a responsibility for every coach, that you have to understand you're coaching people. You're not coaching chess pieces. And so we like to just get them to increase their powers on the chessboard so we can move them around and win the game. But that's a pretty selfish approach to coaching. The players aren't there to serve us. We're there to serve them. And we have to understand that we're coaching people. So they're more than their jump shot. They're more than their post skills or defensive abilities. They're people with emotions and fears and goals and aspirations and insecurities and relationships. That all that stuff plays into it. And so if we're really there to serve them, to help them become the best players that they're capable of, we have to take that into account. We have to start addressing the mental side of the game and that approach to it. Otherwise, we're just trying to tap into their skills and use them for our advantage. And that's really a shallow way to go about it.
I love that, looking at players as more than just chess pieces. And it really got me thinking about the way that as coaches, we have to be communicating with these players and also seeing them as more than their skill set. Obviously, though, when you take that approach the way you have, you end up finding a lot of success in players getting better, right? Which are the results you wanted from originally. And in the G League level, you start seeing a lot of things like call-ups and players finding success at that next level. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about some of the call-ups that you've seen happen recently that you're incredibly proud of, and where you see those players going?
Yeah. Just recently, DeAnthony Melton signed in the recent free agent frenzy that happened this year in 2020, signed a big new contract with the Memphis Grizzlies, which was awesome to see. He spent a lot of time with us in NAZ. And so to see a guy like that, for it to pay off and to be rewarded was great. I think he'll be a fantastic player. And the other ones you see that you don't necessarily see are guys that are having successful careers overseas too. The G League becomes a launching pad for a career. The NBA is obviously the most visible, but there's a lot of ways to make money in basketball, and guys are getting getting paid. We was just talking with Alec Peters this week, and he's over in Europe and playing at a high level and on some good teams. And so it's cool to see those success stories as well.
Oh, of course. And then off that note, are there any players that you kind of are shocked by that haven't gotten those call-ups yet, or those opportunities that you know will come in really soon? Who are those players we should be looking out for?
Yeah, the G League is just full of those guys, and it's really hard. And this is kind of the mental piece of it that you have to help them navigate. Is there's a limited number of jobs in the NBA, a limited number of roster spots, and there are a ton of guys in the G League right now who are capable of being on an NBA roster, being in a rotation, maybe even being a starter. And there's just so much that goes into the decision for those guys to make it to the NBA. It's not just about their talent alone. It's also about, any kind of personality or character traits that they might have and how they'll impact the team. But not just that, like it's team needs. Every organization has a different approach to how they're filling out their roster. Sometimes it's just a contract deal. Like, how much money would you be scheduled to make based on the salary scales? There's just so many factors that go into it. And it's something we talk about a lot, with the players I've coached is, scouts are coming to the G League games to watch them play. They got a list of 100 guys that are potential to be called up to the roster. They're looking for any reason to cross that list off and narrow down the choice. And so what we told our guys a lot, like, don't give them any reason to cross your name off the list. Whatever that is, it's tuck your shirt in, or, dress professionally, or your attitude on the bench, whatever your approach to the officials, whatever that might be, don't give them any reason to cross your name off the list. So that's just the battle that guys are facing in the G League. It's tough. There's just a finite number of jobs. But yeah, a ton of guys in the league who have the potential to play in the NBA.
Definitely. It's crazy to think about when you think about how much talent the NBA has, and there's another level to it entirely when it comes to how much talent the G League has. It's incredible to wrap your mind around that. Transitioning back to the mental side of things, I was curious to ask you about of Jalen LeCue, who's been on your roster, and he's a player that in high school was getting a lot of attention and a lot of YouTube hits for his style of play and the way it was received by social media. How do you think that something like that off the court impacts on the court performance, and how have you seen him overcome that and play with that as a backdrop?
Yeah, it's kind of the new generation of players, and the way the league is going. It's such a player focused league. It's such a highlight driven league, and so players eat that stuff up, and they get a lot of attention because of it. I think what they learn over time is that there has to be some substance behind the flash, and that takes some maturity and some growth to understand that and develop that. But it definitely impacts the way, and what we said about the G League. Like, you're going into the G League and there's not a lot of notoriety there. People aren't watching you, and it really forces you to focus on what's important. And if you want to have a long career, then you better have, a lot of substance to your game and your personality and your character. And because it's going to be a lot of highs and lows. You're going to have the moments where you make spectacular plays and you get a lot of attention, and you're going to have twice as many moments where nothing happens. You don't move the needle at all. You just show up and do work every single day. But being able to develop that consistency is what pays off over time, and I think, Jalen came into the league with supernatural athletic ability in the way he can jump. And, it's like all of us, every time you change levels, it's an eye opener to what else you need to add to your game and your routines and your habits to sustain at a new level. And that's what he's in the process of learning and developing right now, which he's on his way.
It's great to hear that and how players can navigate that. Thinking about that mental side, I was curious to ask you about ChampionShift, which is a program you've been developing recently. And what made you realize that there was something missing in the mental side of the game to go all in on that?
Yeah, when I moved from the video room into a player development role with the Phoenix Suns, as I started working with more of those players, the players I started working with were kind of the end of the rotation guys, 10-day contract guys. And we were trying to figure out ways to, I was trying to help them crack the rotation, get meaningful minutes and be impactful in those minutes. Now in the NBA, you don't have a lot of practice time. So they're doing a lot of individual workouts and small group workouts. And so I found two kind of missing pieces for those guys to try to crack the rotation. One, how do we get what they're learning in those individual workouts to apply to the game setting? And then two, when the lights come on, how do you make all that hard work pay off? How do you perform well at your best in the biggest moments? And I was watching guys like Steph Curry, who seem to do impossible things every single night and drop into mind states seemingly on demand. And how does he do this? How does he tap into this on a consistent basis? And just the way I'm wired, I didn't believe that it's something you have or you don't. I had a cohort of players I was working with, and I got to figure out how to help them reach that level. So that's where I dove into it, and to figure out those two things, the application of skills learned, and then two, which is where I've really spent a lot more time with ChampionShift, is how do we make all that hard work pay off when it matters most? How can we be at our best in competition's biggest moments? And it's it's been fun. I think it's a piece that is untapped, especially in the NBA, but a place with a lot of potential to help players develop and grow.
Of course, that entire subset of the coaching industry is so, in terms of the mental side, is so interesting. What in terms of with championships, how can players get accustomed to it? How could they learn more about it? How could they end up using it? What does that look like for them?
Yeah, so we have a program. Kind of our premier program is called Catching Confetti, and it's a online 8-week program that we've distilled down the 7 essential mindsets of world-class performance. And so in that program, we teach through the 7 mindsets, and then we offer exercises to help you develop those mindsets in yourself. And so we've actually set it up for athletes and for coaches to help you develop that part of your game. And how can we, like I talked about with Steph Curry, how can you drop into kind of a flow state, flow mindset, almost on demand? And through that program with Catching Confetti, we got videos online, exercises to go through it, discussion guides to do it as a group and team. I'll coach people through the process one-on-one. And so that's kind of the gateway to tapping into your best mindset.
Exciting stuff, definitely. And one thing I thought was interesting that I heard you talk about on the Basketball Immersion podcast, you were talking about how Kobe Bryant would find losing exciting because he saw it as an opportunity to get better. Can you talk about that a little bit more, and how players could really take advantage of that little piece of advice?
Yeah, it's what we talk about with the victor mindset, which is the third piece of our 7 mindsets. And it is how do you approach negative outcomes or outcomes that didn't maybe match your expectations? And it's this idea of that we're trying to learn from every experience. Life is more about who you're becoming than what you achieve. It's more about growing and experiencing than accomplishing and conquering. And with that mindset, your potential is endless. You always have another step, another new thing to try on. During the pandemic shutdown quarantine phase, I joined a tennis league, a little city tennis league. And in every match, the idea was, let's go play as much tennis as I could to see how good I could get. And I went 3-10 my first season in the league. But the whole idea was like every match was a chance to learn. Every time I got to swing the racket was a chance to learn. And so the wins and losses weren't the thing. It was, how much can I learn? How much better could I get just by putting myself out there? And every time you lose or you face an obstacle or an opponent that exposes a weakness, that's exciting. It's thrilling because here's another opportunity for me to grow. here's another opportunity for me to expand my skill set, my tool set, or my mindset. And so I think that's what Kobe was referring to when he talked about that, losing being exciting.
Definitely, it's incredibly insightful to think about that. And for one final question, I was curious to hear about what kind of, maybe when it comes to developing mindset, what were some mistakes that you made early on that if you could go back, you'd have some advice to tell your past self, hey, Coach Bret, 20-year-old Coach Bret, a 25-year-old Coach Bret, this is what you should be doing differently for over the next few years to really help these players get better. What's some advice you'd give your past self?
Yeah, I would tell him I would tell myself to go through catching confetti. Because everything I've learned and built in this program is what I needed to be a better player as a college athlete, but even be a better coach from the get-go. And so I think that's what I would tell myself is I think two things part of that. One is your mindset can be developed. Like what these great players have, the people I would stand in awe of, at the phenomenal things they were able to do, it's not because they were born with it. They might have been born with some like talent, right, or athletic ability that I'm never going to jump as high as LeBron. But the mindset those guys are able to tap into is not unique. It's not reserved for a chosen few. We can develop that in ourselves. And I think if I had that understanding and then invested in it, took time to, we all lifted weights a lot and we all took shot 100 jumpers every day. We all did those kind of things, but how many of us spent time developing the mental skills? And I don't think it's done enough. And I don't think it's done intentionally enough towards a specific outcome. And so I think I would have told myself those two things. You can develop it. Now go develop it, spend time on it.
Incredible advice, because so many people don't really pay enough attention to it and really neglect that aspect of the game. And that's great advice of you really need to immerse yourself in this and really take it seriously. So Coach Bret, thank you so much for coming on. I think this was a great episode that really opened my mind up to benefits of the mental side of the game, as well as a bunch of lessons from your outstanding coaching career up to this point. And I can't wait to see what's next, and best of luck with everything going forward. We'll definitely keep in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.